Welcome to beautiful, historic Old Town Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. I'm standing here with the Bay of St. Louis behind me. Bay St. Louis, Mississippi is located on the Gulf Coast in between Gulfport to our east and New Orleans, Louisiana to our west. In 1699, French explorers d'Iberville and Bienville established the original settlement that was known as the Bay of St. Louis. In the 1800s, the settlement was renamed Shieldsboro after a local shipbuilder. The state legislature changed the name to Bay St. Louis in 1818. Bay St. Louis is known for its culture, art, and laid-back lifestyle. Today, the city is known as a place apart because of its enchanting and welcoming atmosphere. It was at this site in 1814 that the Battle of Bay St. Louis took place. In addition to the Battle of the Bay of St. Louis, Old Town has many other historic sites for visitors to take in as they enjoy the food, the arts, and the southern culture of small town Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Bay St. Louis was recently voted the number 3 coolest small town in America by Budget Travel. And it was voted the 5th best small coastal town by USA Today. I'm pleased to take you on a tour through historic Old Town Bay St. Louis, and I hope that you're just as enchanted as everyone else who visits our little piece of paradise. During the War of 1812, a small yet very important skirmish was fought in the Bay of St. Louis. Because of its proximity to New Orleans and the mouth of the Mississippi River, in 1814, the Bay of St. Louis saw action in the war. Gunboats were sent to patrol the Mississippi Sound, and those gunboats ran into a substantial British fleet at the tip of Cat Island. Preparing for battle, the gunboats went into Bay St. Louis and received provisions. The U.S. schooner Seahorse was sent into the bay to remove the provisions and destroy all of the supplies that were left in Bay St. Louis so that the British could not get their hands on them. The British tried to prevent the Seahorse from accomplishing that goal. All of the commotion that was taking place in the bay drew a very large crowd of observers to the end of Ullman Avenue. A bystander by the name of John Baptiste Toomey lit a cannon that was nearby, and he aimed it at the British vessels. That cannon fire initiated the Battle of the Bay of St. Louis. The Seahorse was far outnumbered by the British ships and was set on fire by its own captain in order to prevent the British from seizing the ship. The battle lasted for only about 2.5 hours and seemed very inconsequential at the moment. However, it proved to be a long enough delay of the British ships to be beneficial for Andrew Jackson to prepare to fight the Battle of New Orleans. The second stop on our tour is Depot Row, which includes the train depot as well as the Alice Mosley Museum. The Bay St. Louis Train Depot, built in 1928, houses the Visitors Center, where visitors can get information about businesses and attractions in Bay St. Louis, the Mardi Gras Museum, featuring beautiful Mardi Gras costumes, and the Alice Mosley Folk Art and Antique Museum. The depot itself is set in a park-like setting, featuring many live oak trees, picnic tables, benches, and a walking path. Across the street from the depot is Depot Row, which houses businesses as well as residential properties. For a short period of time in the early 2000s, the depot actually served as an Amtrak station. Passengers could buy tickets and board the passenger train at this location. Recently, there's been talk from the local tourism board about bringing back the passenger train to Bay St. Louis. But until that time comes, the depot serves as a museum venue. The Alice Mosley Museum is a must-see in Old Town Bay St. Louis, and visitors usually leave the museum with a smile on their face and a love of Alice Mosley in their hearts. The museum was relocated to the depot in 2013. It had previously been housed across the street in a small shotgun house. There are 52 works of art by Alice Mosley in addition to other local antiques. It does not cost the public to enter the museum and enjoy the artwork. The museum is supported by donations and the sale of prints of Miss Mosley's work. Alice Mosley was a self-taught folk artist who began painting in her 60s. She moved to Bay St. Louis at the age of 79, and she spent the rest of her life painting in downtown Bay St. Louis until she passed away at the age of 94. Many of her pieces from later in her life feature distinct landmarks and people from Bay St. Louis. The next stop on our tour is Our Lady of the Gulf Catholic Church, the St. Joseph's Academy, and St. Stanislaus College. Father Louis Stanislaus Pate received the deed to the property at 228 South Beach Boulevard that is now home to Our Lady of the Gulf Catholic Church in 1847. By 1854, Father Bateau had established 2 Catholic schools, one for boys and one for girls. The original church and school structures burned to the ground in 1907. The construction on the church structure that still exists today started in 1908. The church has gone through several major renovations, most notably after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Our Lady of the Gulf Catholic Church is the mother church of Hancock County, the 3rd oldest parish on the Gulf Coast, and the 5th oldest in the state of Mississippi. It features an Italian marble altar and beautiful stained glass windows. The boys' school, St. Stanislaus College, is a high school for grades 7 through 12. It's managed by the Brothers of Sacred Heart. The girls' school, St. Joseph's Academy, was run by the Sisters of St. Joseph, and the last class to graduate from St. Joseph's Academy did so in 1967. The building no longer stands. The 4th stop on our tour is the very intriguing 100 Men Hall. In 1894, the organization known as the 100 Members Debating Benevolent Association was created by 12 African American residents of Bay St. Louis. Their original purpose was to assist the sick, bury the dead, and to knit friendship. It turned into an open forum for the African American community of the city. The existing hall was built in 1922. That building became known as the 100 Men Hall and eventually began to attract famous musicians such as James Brown, Etta James, and Ray Charles. These artists were part of what was known as the Chitlin Circuit, which was a group of venues that hosted African American musicians when whites-only clubs would not allow them to perform. The hall is one of the few standing structures on the Mississippi Blues Trail. It was damaged in 2005, but since has been restored. The current owner, Rachel Dangermond, rents the building for public use. The purpose of the building remains to be a gathering place for the community. 100 Men Hall is a cultural icon in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Next, we go back to the beach for our 5th stop, which is the Hancock Bank Building. It sits on the corner of Beach Boulevard and Main Street on one of the highest points in all of Bay St. Louis. This 2-story brick building was finished in 1900 to house the bank that was opened on October 9, 1899. As Hancock County grew, the need for a financial institution also grew. When the bank first opened, it held a total of just over $8,000 in deposits. Hancock Bank has grown into a large regional financial institution with branches in several southern states. The main branch office is still located in this building in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Next, we go to the First Baptist Church on Main Street. The First Baptist Church, under the leadership of Reverend O.D. Bowen, moved to this location on Main Street in 1947. Like most buildings in the city of Bay St. Louis, the church was damaged by both Hurricane Camille and Hurricane Katrina, and the First Baptist Church chose to rebuild here on Main Street rather than moving away, and it has become an iconic building in downtown Bay St. Louis. Our 7th stop on the tour is the 2nd Street Elementary School. This beautiful 2-story Spanish Revival building was built in 1927. It cost a total of $80,000 and was originally the home of Bay High School. The current high school was built in 1950, and this building became an elementary school in the Bay Waveland School District. This building served as a school until 2005. The hurricane-damaged building was deemed not structurally sound to house a school, and the property was sold to a developer from New Orleans, Louisiana. Jim MacPhail has repeatedly promised to keep the historical integrity of the building, but has yet decided what he will actually do with the property. Half of it's in a residential zone and the other half in a commercial zone, making the planning difficult for MacPhail. He has proposed a hotel, but the Planning and Zoning Commission denied that proposal. The building stands in its damaged state to this day. Next, we move down the street to St. Augustine's Seminary. St. Augustine's Seminary is a very important historical establishment for African American Catholic men in Bay St. Louis. The Divine Word missionaries founded the seminary in 1920, but it was originally located in Greenville, Mississippi. It was moved to Bay St. Louis in 1923. It is the oldest existing Catholic seminary in Mississippi. In May of 1934, the first group of African American men in the United States was ordained right here in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. And last but not least, our tour takes us to Cedar Point. Cedar Point is the area of Bay St. Louis, which is located in the northern part of the city. It was developed by G.W. Dunbar in the 1880s when he built a seafood cannery at the end of Dunbar Avenue. Later in 1909, the Peerless Oyster Company opened, bringing even more activity to Cedar Point. Today, the Bay Waveland Yacht Club is located in its spot. Cedar Point is still recognized for its beautiful waterfront property. Thank you for touring historic downtown Bay St. Louis.